name is Jeremy Devins, and welcome back to the Quiet Mind Astrology podcast. And today we are looking at the US election happening on November 5th, 2024, just a couple of days from when I'm recording this. And what's going to happen? Who's going to win? We'll look at the charts of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and Elon Musk, who's very active in this election. And we'll also look at the statistics of previous presidents and what are some of the themes? What are some of the common astrological placements? I actually have a chart for every president in history in the US, and I've looked at the patterns and statistics. I'll be sharing my research findings here in this episode. And this is political, but I like to focus on what you can control personally most of the time. But a lot of people are interested in this, so let's talk about it. Let's look at it, have some fun with it. But if you want to look at your own chart personally and decode your chart and apply all these things I'm talking about today to yourself to better understand yourself and others, go to quietmindastrology.com/101. The Vedic Astrology 101 course is coming up soon, live on Zoom. And it is called the Decode Your Birth Chart Workshop because I show you how to decode every placement, planets, signs, houses, and nakshatras, and what it means, how to start interpreting it, how to start to be your own astrologer. Really cool stuff, really fun stuff. And if you want to go on beyond that to give readings and things like that, you're actually set up super well with this. I love it. It's maybe the 7th time I've offered this workshop, and it just gets better and better every time. And I'm like so proud of it, so happy with how it's come out, that it's so easy to learn astrology. And it's amazing. People come out of this 2-hour workshop reading their chart. It's like, hey, that took me so long. How did you do that so fast? Well, I'm just trying to condense all my years of experience into the workshop. So it saves you a lot of time and frustration trying to figure things out on your own. So let's look at it. Let's look at the date, November 5th, 2024, the big day of the election. By the way, I'll also look at the weekly transits as well as we always do here, the Friday forecast, what's coming up this week. Quickly, the brief, more personal transits, but I always look at the big picture in the monthly horoscopes. So anyway, November 5th, 2024, we've got the US elections. Now, interesting thing about the US elections is they always happen on the time when Sun is in Libra, and that's where the Sun is considered debilitated. Now, the positive side of Sun in Libra is there's a sense of justice, fairness, finding what's right and balanced for everyone involved. But it's also this energy that can make leaders look weak. The Sun, the leadership. Libra is about compromise and trying to find what's best for everyone. And often, most of the time, the elections are about 51 to 49% split in the US. Sometimes you have things like Ronald Reagan in the 80s where the whole country was red except Minnesota, but these things are more exceptions than common, especially in recent elections. They've been very split. So it's very likely in the election in the US in general that it's going to be split. Other big thing going on is that the US is having its Pluto return, almost exact to the degree it happened this year that it was the exact degree. And whenever a country goes through this, it's about a 250-year cycle, there's some sort of big change, big upheaval, big change that's needed in the whole country. Pluto is this subconscious, deeper energy within all of us. And for a country in Capricorn, Pluto especially, where the US had Pluto in Capricorn and its Declaration of Independence, there's a lot of deep stuff in the structures of the government that are needing to be reassessed. And both political parties are very strongly suggesting that if they lose, that it could be catastrophe, right? So if the Republicans win, the Democrats are saying that it's going to be this, all these terrible things are going to happen, and vice versa. So that's part of this Pluto and Capricorn energy. And we've got this Uranus just moved into Taurus. That's also going to bring revolution into the financial systems of the US and affect the world economy dramatically by 2030, which I've talked about a lot in the past. But Pluto and Capricorn, since 2020, this started, and we saw like massive civil unrest, riots, pandemic, just total turnaround of like what the country is and what we think it is. And in a lot of ways, I think the political parties have flipped from when I grew up and when Uh, the Bush and the Republicans were all about censorship and control and war, and now the Democratic Party is more like this. And it's very interesting, very kind of surreal to see that happen. But with Pluto and Capricorn, it's like upheaval, changing everything, shifting everything. And we have Rahu and Pisces, which is also this idealistic kind of energy. So both candidates have a pretty strong sort of idealistic vision of the country going forward. And we've got Saturn in Aquarius also. These are just the global transits happening that are all overlapping with November 5th and affecting the US and politics. So Saturn in Aquarius is this big innovation energy, big innovation in technology. And we've seen this with AI and other developments, robotics, space travel, things like that. And it will continue until the spring of 25. But Saturn in Aquarius is bringing this new energy throughout this election cycle as well. This need for like newness, transformation, revolution, upheaval. And that's where I'm personally, this is just sort of my opinion, leaning more towards what Donald Trump and having Elon Musk is going to do or suggesting he will do with the Department of Government Efficiency. Now, this is something I've been all about for a long time. It's like there's just too much bureaucracy, too much complication in the government. So this is just more my opinion. But Elon Musk is in this very powerful time in his whole life and Rahu Dasha. And I think if he is given the influence in the government to strip away excess spending and departments and all this, I think that is why I'm leaning towards, just personally, kind of intuitively leaning towards that path. I haven't really heard something similar from Kamala Harris. I just haven't really. I've been watching a lot of both of the Donald Trump and Kamala Harris stuff. I'm just not really hearing anything from her about like big upheaval like this. There's a lot of this revolutionary energy in the government, and I think if this happens with like Donald Trump also bringing in Robert F. Kennedy Jr., this idea of like make America healthy again and wanting to eliminate seed oils from U.S. food, and a lot of this is starting to happen already with some new policies around food dyes and things like that, which are long overdue in the U.S. So a lot of revolutionary stuff. Saturn and Aquarius, major innovation, and Elon Musk has been at the forefront of a lot of that stuff, and he's having that Saturn in Aquarius over his seventh house, which has to do with business dealings and commerce in the marketplace, and over his ninth house, which is a very adventurous kind of energy on top of the innovative energy. So he's kind of at the forefront of this Saturn and Aquarius, this revolutionary energy. He just brought out like the new robots and robo taxis and Neuralink. Like he's involved in all this stuff in the new rockets that can now be reusable, and very much like revolution of Uranus and Taurus, upheaval of Pluto and Capricorn, and Saturn and Aquarius innovation. So there's that. And it's not directly Donald Trump. I haven't even talked about him that much, but for him, he's going through this Jupiter Dasha that he started in 2016 when he first won the presidency, and he's been in this world of around the politics, since then, and controversy and all this stuff around politics and that role, even when he wasn't president, and still in the news all the time through that. So I think he's still going to be in the political sphere in some form for sure throughout this whole Jupiter Dasha. And it's Jupiter in Chitra. So Jupiter is expansion, growth. Chitra is the architect energy. It's this visionary, like celestial architect energy of like creation. So there's that energy in him of wanting to create something, build something, and expand a lot and a lot of growth. So there's been that, like building the wall and doing all these things that he has, all these plans that he has. And now Kamala Harris, uh, to be fair and balanced here, I don't, you know, just me personally, I think it's important to disclose. Like I'm personally leaning towards, I know Elon Musk is a polarizing person, Donald Trump especially, But I think some sort of government efficiency program is long overdue, especially when we're going through this Pluto return. So I'm leaning towards that. But let's see what Kamala Harris has going for her. Is if we look at the research of all the US presidents throughout history, we see that one of the highest patterns, the strongest pattern in the whole research of all the planets and signs is that 22% or 10 of the US presidents have Mars in Cancer. And she has Mars in Cancer, which we can see here. It's in her second house. So that's very strong. And it's Arat Makaraka. So there's this strong energy to take action, to move. And she's been in the spotlight. She's been a very public figure throughout her career. And Mars in Cancer is a protective kind of energy. It's debilitated, but it is this protective energy of finding what is fair and best for everybody and wanting to take care of the thing that they're taking care of. And it's a Mars return for her right now. And Mars, yeah, because Mars is in Cancer for everybody. And we're going to go through this Mars retrograde thing in December. So that has me wondering if there's going to be some sort of election controversy, which it seems like a lot of things are pointing to already. There's already been some issues with different election fraud kind of risks and things on both sides. So she's got this Mars in Cancer return, and that's the most common placement for US presidents of all placements. 22% of them, which isn't the highest number, but that's the most strong planet and sign correlation I saw. And of any of the patterns of anything else I looked at, that was one of the strongest ones I could see. So Mars in Cancer is great for her. She's in her Rahu Dasha, like Elon Musk also. Uh, Tim Walz is in his Saturn Dasha, which is actually a great Dasha to be in for government service roles. But she's in her Rahu Dasha since 2012, and she's been very active in the public sphere and politics in California and now in the US. And she's in her Rahu Mercury in 2020, and now going into her Rahu Venus this year, which activated her Venus in Leo. That's happened in February, and now Venus in Leo is a pretty powerful, in the spotlight, wants to be seen kind of energy, and that's pretty solid for her as well. And we see she's got Saturn in Aquarius, so she's having a Saturn in return as well, which is not so good for her. That's a challenging placement to have Saturn return. And generally, it's going to bring more obstacles, more delays, more setbacks. We just saw this thing like she was going to have Beyonce perform with her in Houston, and Beyonce didn't perform, or there's some controversy or miscommunication there. Things like this happening, like setbacks in her campaign. There's an interesting guy online uh, he's got this access to data to track how many unique cell phones are in a location. And he's finding that the majority of people who are coming to Kamala's rallies, you can look this up, are bussed in, and they're the same people, right? So he's seeing it's the same cell phone data coming in to all these different rallies. Whereas he's also tracking Donald Trump's rallies and seeing that it's usually like 40 to 60% new people at the rallies and on their devices, and larger crowds as well. But again, it's one of those things that's often skewed in the media where they don't really show these kind of things accurately. But you can go on X.com and see pictures of who's actually at the rallies and things like that. So that may be just some of my bias showing as well. But she also has Moon in Aries, and the last president, Joe Biden, has Moon in Aries. So there's already that kind of energy that's in the office and that's there, and that may want to perpetuate Moon and Aries energy into the White House. But it's a bit of an impulsive energy, like it's very starting energy. Like when Joe Biden came into office, I think he had like maybe the most executive orders of any president in history within the first 100 days. Like just tons of like, let's start this, let's start that, let's start that. That's very Moon and Aries kind of energy. Donald Trump has Moon in Scorpio, also Mars ruled, but it's a little more intense, a little more secretive. Like he's talked about different plans, like, how would you get this done? How would you do that? He's like, I can't really tell you, but I'll get it done. versus Moon in Aries is more like, we need to do this. We're going to do this. We cannot let this thing happen. That sort of thing. So that's what we see in Kamala Harris. And then Tim Walz, again, Saturn Dasha, also having a Saturn return, right? So that's a little challenging. Uh, again, it's Saturn brings setbacks, delays, challenges. It makes you reevaluate everything. So when you're going through the Saturn return and it's retrograde, it's just a lot of need to slow down. And I think for him and Kamala both, the need to take this a slow approach through this process and like be patient. And again, with the Mars in Cancer delays thing that's going to happen, Mars retrograde and Mars spending about 8 months in Cancer total, that to me might point to some sort of controversy where the election results are not clear, and then maybe Kamala ends up back in office when Mars goes direct. I'm not so sure about this. But generally don't like to make predictions about politics because I think it's not exactly what we see. And there was a lot of signs. Again, I try to be unbiased in this with the astrology, but there was a lot of signs that pointed to Donald Trump winning the election last time. And the same way that in 2020, there was so many things pointing to Al Gore winning the election, and he did win the popular vote that year. But and I know there's so many people are like, there's no election fraud, there's nothing, but it's already happening that both parties are saying it is happening. There's always been election fraud. There's no doubt about that. But a lot of that was censored in 2020. Um, I don't really, I don't actually care that much who's president, but I'm leaning towards, especially the Department of Government Efficiency. They're going to like eliminate a bunch of useless taxes and just wasting money, billions of dollars on like roads and internet ideas that don't actually put anybody online. I forget how many billions of dollars they spent on this internet program that hasn't actually gotten people online. These kind of things are so inefficient in the government. So, in terms of Trump, again, I think looking at the actual day of the election, we have that Mars in Cancer, which is great for Kamala, her return there. We have the Sun in Libra is challenging for leaders. We got Mercury in Scorpio with Venus in Scorpio that can show like some miscommunications, some sneaky stuff, some possible election tampering stuff. Mercury in Scorpio, the communication, the intelligence into the hidden realm of Scorpio. And Venus there also is like kind of desire to do some maybe shady stuff or maybe go under the surface of things. So that's interesting. And we also have Rahu with Neptune. Neptune's illusions and fantasies, and Rahu being with Neptune could be that there are some illusions or fantasies or misunderstandings around the election as well. But just based on transits, everything else, I mean, it does look more favorable for Trump. And I think particularly for Elon Musk's involvement is pretty positive for him. I don't have RFK's chart up here. That's also an interesting one to look at with all this. But let's see, he's got Venus Dasha going on, Venus and Capricorn in his seventh house with Rahu, Sun, Mercury. So I think that's very favorable for his relationship. Seems like his relationship's going very well. She's very supportive and everything. He's got Jupiter return happening over his 12th and 11th, especially the 11th house. That's very favorable. The 12th house, I think, is necessary losses for him that are ultimately bringing expansion, like coming out of the election, I think, for him this year. Fits with that Jupiter in the 12th house. And then Jupiter 11th gains this position in society and leadership. So that's good. But yeah, I know politics are so divisive. I probably lost half of my audience already, even just mentioning that I think Trump might win. And that's okay. Yeah. I remember growing up and people had different opinions and it was okay. But you know, I think it's important to talk about if there's any sort of bias that might be filtering things. And That's the observer effect in quantum physics. Like we can't look at it something without influencing our perspective of it. So if you have a bias, it's going to color how you interpret things. But also her Rahu Dasha, Rahu first house, that's pretty awesome. Like bringing her into power, into the spotlight, very favorable in that way. And her Sun return also, she has Sun in Libra natively, so she's having a Sun return during this election. So that could also put her in a position of power. So I'm not making a strong prediction here. I'm thinking that just based on all of the transformational stuff that's going on in the US, I think what Trump, in particular, what Elon Musk is proposing to revamp the government is what is more in alignment with what the government chart or what the transits are showing for the US government. And I just don't see that kind of revolutionary energy in what's going on in Kamala's chart and Tim Walz. So I think it's less likely to be in service to the needs of the country astrologically. So that's just what I see. Open to being wrong, not attached to any of this. And I think it's not the best use of our energy and our power to put so much power into these political figures who actually have it's pretty minor influence over our daily lives. Speaking of our daily lives, let's look at the transits happening this week. We got the new moon in Swati on November 1st. New beginnings, new opportunities to bring more balance into our lives, more compromise, more understanding into our relationships. Tuesday, the sun in Vishaka brings more desire to pursue our goals. This is an ambitious energy, a driven energy, great for setting goals and great for improving relationships in general in Vishaka in Libra. And then November 6th, Wednesday, we've got Venus into Mula, great for addressing root cause issues in relationships, getting to the root of issues and finances and the home life. And if you have a garden, doing a lot of gardening is very favorable with this. And artistic expression, very favorable with this. Getting to the root of your issues in relationships, finances, home, and artistic expression. And then also on that day, Venus in Sagittarius. So in the expansive, adventurous energy. So for 25 days throughout most of November, a great time for exploring more adventurous side of yourself in relationships. And I talked more about this on the monthly episode. You can check that out. But a great time for travel in relationship and trying new things. So that's our quick look at the transits happening this week in the US election. And if this is enough to make you never listen to my podcast again, that I talked about thinking Donald Trump would win, then so be it, you know. But hopefully, we can find more unity and agree to disagree on things. And I think that is the foundation of democracy to be able to say, I have an idea, you have an idea, let's see what's the better idea in the moment and of service to everybody involved. And I know there's a lot of media that portrays both people uh, as poorly as possible. So just keep that in mind. Of course, we're all seeing things that are very skewed. The algorithm is very skewed to what we give the most attention to. So I'm probably not seeing all the best of Kamala Harris. I've tried to watch as many of her interviews as possible, as well as Donald Trump's and everyone involved. Uh, but it seems like things are leaning towards the Trump administration and what he wants to do, and that seems to align with what's happening in the U.S. government. So that's my thoughts. And if you see something I missed, send me a message, leave a comment on Spotify or YouTube, and I look forward to sharing more with you next time on the Quiet Mind Astrology podcast.